I... The shockwaves of Stephen Bell's murder reverberated across the subjugated human worlds like a seismic tremor, fracturing the Breen's iron hold. Whispers of defiance, once spoken in furtive undertones, now rose to a cascading roar. In shadowed alleys and secret meeting places, the spark of rebellion caught and spread, an inexorable conflagration. On the fringes of Breen space, hidden rebel bases hummed with frenetic activity. Marcus Dante, the resistance leader who had rescued the Bells, pored over intercepted intel reports, his brow furrowed in concentration. The data spoke of a clandestine Breen research station, where a new weapon of terrifying potential was being forged. Dante summoned his inner circle, his voice ringing with urgency. This weapon could spell the end of our resistance before it even begins. We need those schematics. His gaze fell on Noah Bell, Stephen's father, a man with a haunted look in his eyes and a gift for slicing through the most impenetrable network defenses. Noah, you're our best hope. We need you to infiltrate the station's systems, find the weapon plans, and anything else that could give us an edge. Noah met Dante's eyes, a flicker of stubborn persistence kindling within. I'll do whatever it takes, for Stephen, for all of us. As Dante's strike team breached the research station's defenses, alarms blared and energy bolts seared the air. Noah's fingers flew over the console, his mind merging with the data stream. The weapon schematics were soon in rebel hands, but it was the encrypted Breen data archive that proved the true prize. Within its labyrinthine depths, Noah unearthed a trove of Imperial secrets, the chink in the Breen's armored hide, military deployments, key infrastructure, the identities of the ruling elite, all laid bare. The information Stephen had died for now armed the resistance with the means to strike at the very heart of Breen power. In the halls of the Breen Governing Council, the specter of human rebellion cast a pall. Emperor Daxus's mailed fist slammed against the obsidian table as Fleet Admiral Zoran's words poured venom in his ear. The contagion of defiance must be cauterized without mercy, my lord. Give me the authority to scour these human worlds clean. Counselor Valen's measured tones cut through the gathering storm. Oppression breeds resistance, Admiral. The tighter we seek to grip them, the more violently they will struggle. Conciliation, not annihilation, is the path to lasting stability. But Daxus had already decided, his eyes glinting with the cold certainty of steel. You have your orders, Admiral. Crush this rebellion, despite the toll. Let the galaxy burn, so long as human defiance is reduced to ashes. Across the stars, the groundswell of insurgency gathered into a rising tsunami. Marcus Dante's dream of a united resistance was crystallizing into reality. Disparate rebel factions drawn to his banner. Breen facilities burned and prison camps cracked open, each victory fanning the flames of revolution higher. On Earth, the Breen's chokehold remained implacable, but even there, defiance flickered in the shadows. Dr. Alara Kiran moved through the corridors of power, her true allegiance concealed behind a mask of collaboration. With every whispered secret she fed the rebels, the Breen's doom crept closer. The Breen's retaliation was as swift as it was brutal. Massacres and mass arrests became the order of the day, entire cities subjected to the boot of martial law. But the rebels matched the Empire's ruthless commitment with unwavering courage. For every resistance fighter who fell, a dozen rose to take their place, baptized in the fire of shared suffering. The drumbeats of war echoed through the galaxy as the human resistance and the Breen Imperial war machine hurtled towards a cataclysmic confrontation. Two immovable forces on a collision course, the fate of worlds hanging in the balance. The future would be written in the blood of heroes and tyrants alike. In the heart of the Zephyrus asteroid field, the rebel base thrummed with purpose and preparation. Marcus Dante moved among the training grounds, his presence a galvanizing force. He paused to watch a squad of recruits drilling in zero-gravity combat, their movements precise and powerful, honed by relentless practice. Dante turned as Nolan Briggs strode into the command center, his weathered face etched with unbreakable spirit. "Arcadia is with us," Briggs reported, his voice gravel rough. "Keller's fighters are en route. But Dante, the things I saw there, the atrocities committed by that cyborg bastard Malak." His fist clenched, fingers tightening. Dante laid a steadying hand on his lieutenant's shoulder. We'll make them pay, Nolan, for Arcadia, for every human life snuffed out by Breen cruelty. But we have to be smart. We have to be ready. In the shadowed depths of a Breen research station, Dr. Zora Vex lorded over her domain of flesh and suffering. Human test subjects, their bodies warped by horrific experiments, whimpered in cage-like cells. Vex moved among them, her eyes alight with a cold scientific fervor. These humans, she mused, so fragile, yet so resilient. The key to their strength lies hidden in their genetic code. Unlock that, and our weapon will be unstoppable. A chime sounded, and the ghostly visage of Emperor Daxus materialized on a holographic projector. Progress report, Doctor. I am not a patient man. Vex bowed, her face a mask of obsequious deference. My lord, the work proceeds apace. The planet killer will soon be a reality, but I need more subjects, more time to perfect. You have one lunar cycle, Daxus snapped. Not a moment more. I want that weapon operational before the rebellion gains any further ground. Succeed, and your rewards will be without limit. Fail, and the consequences will be severe. The transmission cut off abruptly. In the smoldering ruins of the Breen shipyard, Eliza Bell stumbled through the wreckage, her heart a leaden weight in her chest. The image of Noah, locked in mortal combat with Overseer Merrick, played over and over in her mind's eye. She had searched for hours, sifting through the debris for any sign of her husband, but found only twisted metal and ash. A part of her refused to believe he was gone, clinging to a desperate, irrational hope. A hand fell on her shoulder and she spun, reaching for her weapon. But it was only Marcus Dante, his face etched with sorrow and understanding. Eliza, he said softly, Noah knew the risks. He sacrificed himself so that others might live free. Honor him by continuing the fight. Eliza nodded, blinking back the sting of tears. The Breen think they can break us, she whispered fiercely. They think they can crush our spirit with fear and brutality. But they're wrong. For every one of us they kill, 100 more will rise up. We'll bleed them dry, one cut at a time, and in the end they'll drown in the tides of our defiance. Dante smiled grimly. Well said. Come on, there's work to be done. The Breen want a war, and by all the gods of old Earth, we'll give them one they'll never forget. The calm before the storm settled over the Zephyrus base like a heavy shroud. Marcus Dante stood before a holographic display of the Karen system, his eyes tracing the orbital paths of Breen defense platforms. Jaina Cruz approached, her flight suit already donned. We're ready, sir, she reported, her voice steady despite the weight of what lay ahead. Dante nodded. Then let's remind the Breen why they should fear us. Alarms blared as rebel ships poured from Zephyrus's hidden hangars. Jaina's voice crackled over the comm as her squadron formed up. All wings, report in. A chorus of affirmatives filled the channel. Jaina's hands tightened on her controls as Chiron's swollen red bulk filled her view screen. Initiating attack run. May your aim be true and your shields hold. Energy beams lanced out from Chiron's orbital defenses, carving fiery paths through the void. Rebel ships juked and rolled, their return fire a staccato rhythm of destruction. A Breen cruiser erupted in a silent explosion, and Jaina's fighters streaked through the gap. We're through, she shouted, commencing bombardment of primary targets. On the planet's surface, Jace Keller and Nolan Briggs led their strike teams through the chaos of the shipyards. Smoke and ash choked the air as rebel bombers rained hellfire from above. Keller's voice was muffled by his rebreather as he shouted orders. Alpha Team, secure those data cores. Beta, with me, we're taking out those surface-to-orbit cannons. Briggs and his squad pushed deeper into the facility, their boots crunching over shattered ferrocrete and fallen Breen soldiers. A hail of plasma bolts forced them into cover behind a half-assembled hull plate. Incoming, Briggs bellowed. Heavy units, 3 o'clock. The air shimmered as the Breen governor's cybernetic shock troops phased into view. Metal limbs whirred and clicking mandibles dripped venom as they advanced. Rebel blasters seemed to barely slow the monstrosities. Briggs watched in horror as one of the cyborgs plunged a vibro blade through a rebel's chest plate. "Fall back," he yelled. "We can't hold." His words cut off as the cyborgs froze mid-stride, their lights flickering and dying. A triumphant grin spread across Briggs's scarred face. "Looks like our mole came through. Push forward. Take them while they're down." In the orbital melee, Jaina's fighter bucked as a glancing hit took out her port stabilizers. She gritted her teeth, wrestling the craft back under control. "This is Red Leader. Shipyards are crippled, but we're taking heavy losses. Request immediate extraction." Dante's voice came back, terse but controlled. "Understood, Red Leader. All units, commence withdrawal. The Breen are beaten today, but—" His transmission dissolved into static as a blinding light erupted from beyond the system's edge. Jaina's sensors screamed warnings as space itself seemed to warp and twist. "What in all hells was that?" she breathed. The answer came moments later as Rebel long-range scanners registered the impossible. Tartarus, their foothold, world light-years distant, had been obliterated. The extinction cannon had been unleashed. As the Rebel fleet limped back to Zephyrus, an icy dread settled in the pit of Jaina's stomach. They had won the battle for Chiron, but at what cost? And what new horrors would the Breen unleash next? The Rebel fleet limped back to Zephyrus, a pall of dread hanging over every ship. Dante stood on the bridge of his flagship, his face etched with fierce dedication as he surveyed the holographic display of their losses. "We can't let this stand," Jaina Cruz said, her voice raw with emotion. "Tartarus, all those people." Dante nodded, his eyes never leaving the display. "Agreed. We strike now, before they can use that abomination again." The next days were a blur of feverish preparation. Every Rebel ship, fighter, and ground vehicle was readied for what they all knew could be their final battle. In the war room, Dante gathered his inner circle. "Our target is the extinction cannon's construction site above Pyrrhos," he explained, gesturing to a holographic representation of the volcanic world. "Jace, Nolan, your teams will conduct a ground assault as a diversion. Jaina, your squadrons will run interference against their orbital defenses. We hit hard, we hit fast, and we don't stop until that weapon is destroyed." The plan was audacious, bordering on suicidal, but as they looked around the room at each other's faces, they knew there was no other choice. As the Rebel armada dropped out of hyperspace near Pyrrhos, alarms blared across Breen defense stations. Jaina's voice crackled over the comm as her fighters screamed towards the planet. "All wings, form up. Let's clear a path for our ground teams." On the surface, Jace Keller and Nolan Briggs led their strike forces through rivers of molten rock, their armor barely withstanding the intense heat. Breen defenders poured from fortified bunkers, energy weapons cutting swaths through the Rebel ranks. "Push forward," Keller shouted, his voice nearly drowned out by the roar of volcanic eruptions and weapons fire. "We need to draw their attention away from orbit." For a moment, it seemed to be working. The Rebel advance caught the Breen off guard, their lines buckling under the ferocious assault. But then the sky itself seemed to darken. "By all the gods," Briggs breathed, looking up in horror. A massive shape blotted out the stars. The Breen Worldbreaker, a dreadnought of terrifying proportions. Its main cannon flared to life, and a third of the Rebel fleet vanished in a cataclysmic explosion. Aboard the Defiant, Dante's mind raced. They couldn't retreat, not now, not with the lives of billions hanging in the balance. His eyes fell on the debris field of their own shattered ships, and a desperate plan formed. "All ships," he ordered, "concentrate fire on the Worldbreaker's port side. We're going to build a railgun." It was insanity, cobbling together a massive weapon from the wreckage of their own vessels. But as Eliza Bell strapped herself to the makeshift firing platform, a fierce light burned in her eyes. "This is for Noah," she whispered, her hands steady on the targeting controls. The improvised slug tore through space, punching through the Worldbreaker's weakened shields and ripping into its hull. The dreadnought listed, its weapons falling silent. A cheer went up across the Rebel fleet, but it died in their throats as a blinding light erupted from the planet's surface. The extinction cannon fired, and Pyrrhos shattered like glass. In the aftermath, Dante's battered ships regrouped at the system's edge. The mood was somber as they counted their losses. A single escape pod was recovered from Pyrrhus's remains, Eliza Bell barely clinging to life within. Aboard the Breen command ship Adjudicator, Emperor Daxus's fury was palpable. "You assured me this rebellion would be crushed, Zoran," he snarled. Fleet Admiral Zoran bowed low, sweat beading on his brow. "My lord, if Dr. Vex had not delayed—" "Enough!" Daxus cut him off. "I am placing General Kazreth in command. The time for half measures is over. We will exterminate every human world until this resistance is nothing but ash and memory." On the Defiance Bridge, Dante listened as his advisors argued over their next move. Dr. Kieran advocated caution, while Jace Keller pushed for an all-out offensive. Dante raised a hand, silencing them. "We can't give Kazreth time to begin his campaign of extermination," he said quietly. "We strike now, whatever the cost." As the rebel fleet prepared to jump to hyperspace, Dante looked out at the stars. The weight of uncounted lives rested on his shoulders, and he knew that the choices he made in the coming days would determine the fate of humanity itself. The remnants of the rebel fleet hung in the inky void, a patchwork of battle-scarred ships limping through space. On the Defiance Bridge, Marcus Dante's fingers dug into the armrests of his command chair. The weight of their losses at Pyrrhus pressed down on him, but a fire still burned in his eyes. "We can't give them time to regroup," he said, his voice low and intense. "We hit them where it hurts. Indomitus itself." A hush fell over the bridge crew. Jaina Cruz, her flight suit still stained with coolant from her damaged fighter, stepped forward. "Sir, with all due respect, that's suicide. Indomitus is—" "Our only chance," Dante cut her off. "You'll lead the fighter assault, Cruz. Keller, prepare your ground teams." As the rebel forces scrambled to prepare, Noah Bell's escape pod was brought aboard. The grizzled veteran stumbled onto the deck, his face haggard but alive. Nolan Briggs clasped his arm, relief evident in his eyes. "Thought we'd lost you, old friend," Briggs said. Noah managed a weak smile. "Takes more than a Breen overseer to keep me down. What did I miss?" Briggs' expression darkened. "Everything. But there's no time. We've got a job to do." The rebel assault on Indomitus unfolded with brutal efficiency. Jaina's fighters tore through the defensive screen, exploiting gaps that shouldn't have existed. On the massive throne world's surface, Keller's teams fought tooth and nail against waves of cybernetic shock troops. "Push forward!" Keller shouted, his armor blackened by plasma burns. "We need to reach the central citadel." But their initial success was short-lived. General Kazreth's reinforcements arrived like an avenging hammer, smashing into the rebel lines. Jaina's voice crackled over the comm, strained and desperate. "We're getting torn apart up here. Keller, tell me you've got something." On the ground, Keller's team fought their way into a fortified bunker. They found Eliza Bell chained to a wall, her body battered, but her spirit unbroken. As Keller worked to free her, she gasped out vital information. "The cannon, I know how to stop it," she wheezed, "but Daxus, he's—" An explosion rocked the chamber. Keller's mind raced. They couldn't reach Daxus now, not with Kazreth's forces swarming over them, but Eliza's intel, it could change everything. "All units, fall back to extraction points," he ordered. "We've got what we came for." Across the sector, on the blighted world of Anceris, Noah and Briggs infiltrated Dr. Vex's nightmarish laboratory. The stench of chemicals and decay assaulted their senses as they moved through dimly lit corridors. "My God," Noah whispered, peering into a holding cell. "What has she done to these people?" Before Briggs could answer, alarms blared. They'd triggered something. A failsafe, a trap, it didn't matter. What mattered was the hissing of gas from hidden vents, and the screams of the Breen lab workers as their flesh began to bubble and warp. "The virus!" Briggs shouted. "We've got to—" But Noah stood transfixed, watching as the Breen scientist writhed in agony while he remained untouched. "I'm immune," he breathed. Briggs shoved him toward the exit. "Then you're our only hope. Go! I'll set the charges. Make sure this place burns." Noah hesitated for a split second, then ran. Behind him, Briggs's voice faded into the cacophony of alarms and screams. On Indomitus, Keller fought his way back to Eliza's cell, only to find her slumped against the wall, blood pooling beneath her. With trembling hands, she pressed a data chip into his palm. "Tell Dante," she gasped, her eyes going dim. "Tell him it wasn't for nothing." As the battered rebel fleet regrouped in the Duron Nebula, Dante stood before a holographic display of their losses. The price had been steep, perhaps too steep. But as Noah's pod docked and Keller's team stumbled onto the bridge, a glimmer of hope kindled in his chest. They had paid in blood for this chance. Now they had to make it count. The Defiant's engines thrummed as it dropped out of hyperspace, leading the battered rebel fleet into the swirling gases of the Duron Nebula. Dante stood before the holographic display, his face etched with lines of exhaustion and grief. The losses at Indomitus caused great concern, but a spark of hope flickered as Noah Bell's escape pod docked and Keller's team stumbled onto the bridge. "Report!" Dante commanded, his voice hoarse. Noah stepped forward, his eyes bright with purpose despite his haggard appearance. "Sir, on Ansaris, I discovered something. The Breen virus, it didn't affect me. I'm immune." A murmur rippled through the bridge crew. Dante's brow furrowed. "And Briggs?" Noah's face fell. He stayed behind to make sure the lab was destroyed." Keller pushed through the crowd, clutching a blood-stained data chip. "We got what we came for on Indomitus," he said grimly. Eliza's last words. She said it wasn't for nothing. As the implications sank in, the bridge erupted into heated debate. Jaina Cruz argued for an immediate counterattack, while Dr. Kieran urged caution. Dante raised a hand, silencing them. "Noah," he said, "your immunity, could it be the key to neutralizing the extinction cannon?" Before Noah could respond, alarms blared. A massive Breen fleet dropped out of hyperspace, led by General Kazreth's dreadnought, the Desolator. "All hands to battle stations," Dante roared. "Jaina, scramble your fighters. We need a diversion." As rebel ships surged into action, Dante pulled Noah and Keller aside. "We have one shot at this," he said, his voice low and intense. "Noah, we need to weaponize your immunity. Keller, take a team and infiltrate the Hekaran shipyards. Use Eliza's codes to plant a virus in their reactors." The plan unfolded in controlled chaos. Jaina's fighters darted between capital ships, drawing Kazreth's armada into a deadly dance. On the shipyard's command deck, Keller's team fought their way through waves of cybernetic defenders. "Now!" Keller shouted, slamming the data chip into a console. The facility's lights flickered and alarms wailed as the virus spread through its systems. Aboard the Defiant, Dante watched as the shipyard's defenses crumbled. "All ships, push through their lines," he ordered. "Target the Desolator." But as the rebel fleet surged forward, a sinister glow emanated from Kazreth's flagship. The extinction cannon, hidden within the dreadnought's hull, hummed to life. "Evasive maneuvers!" Dante yelled, but it was too late. They were caught in the weapon's kill zone. Suddenly, the Desolator's targeting systems went dark. A garbled transmission cut through the static. "For Earth, for humanity." The voice belonged to Colonel Calvan, a Breen officer whose conscience had finally broken through years of indoctrination. In the precious seconds bought by Calvan's sacrifice, the rebel fleet concentrated its fire. The extinction cannon erupted in a spectacular explosion, crippling the Desolator. Hours later, as the captured dreadnought was secured and General Kazreth taken into custody, Dante received word of another Imperial attack. With their forces stretched thin and exhausted, he had no choice but to order a retreat. The ocean world of Tindaris loomed before them, a temporary haven as they licked their wounds. But as the adrenaline of battle faded, old tensions resurfaced. In a makeshift war room, Jace Keller smacked his fist on the table. "We should strike now, while Daxus is reeling," he shouted. Noah shook his head. "We need time. My immunity, it's the key to ending this without more bloodshed." As the argument grew heated, Dante noticed Dr. Kieran's concerned expression. She gestured subtly towards a corner of the room where Trevor Bell, Noah's brother, was engaged in a furtive conversation. Before Dante could investigate further, a shot rang out. Trevor crumpled to the floor, and chaos erupted. Erupted to the floor, blood pooling beneath him. Chaos engulfed the war room as security personnel rushed in, weapons drawn. "Stand down!" Dante roared, his voice cutting through the pandemonium. He knelt beside Trevor's body, checking for signs of life. Finding none, he looked up, his eyes locking onto Noah. What happened here? Noah stood frozen, his face a mask of shock and grief. I don't know. We were arguing about the next move, and then... Jace Keller pushed forward, his face contorted with rage. "It was him," he shouted, pointing at Noah. "He's been compromised by the Breen. This whole immunity thing is a trap." The room exploded into shouting matches, accusations flying. Dante felt control slipping away as factions formed before his eyes. He raised his hand, struggling to restore order, but the damage was done. In the days that followed, the rebellion teetered on the brink of implosion. Keller's hardline faction demanded Noah's arrest, while others rallied behind the promise of his immunity. Dante found himself caught in the middle, desperately trying to hold together a fragile alliance. It was during a tense strategy meeting that Noah finally spoke up, his voice quiet but firm. "I have a plan," he said, silencing the room. "My genetic code. We can use it to neutralize the extinction cannon, render Daxus's superweapons obsolete." Dr. Kieran leaned forward, her eyes sharp. "Explain." Noah laid out his proposal, a daring gambit to disseminate biogenic kill codes derived from his unique DNA. The plan was audacious, borderline insane, but as Dante listened, he felt a spark of hope ignite in his chest. "It's our best shot," Dante declared, cutting off the inevitable arguments. "But we need someone to run the blockade, get these codes to our allies." A cocky voice piped up from the back of the room. "Did someone say, impossible run through enemy lines? Because that sounds like my kind of job." Rick Vance sauntered forward, a roguish grin on his face. Beside him stood Zara, the Itheran mercenary's alien features unreadable. Dante eyed the pair skeptically. "You think you can pull this off?" Rick's grin widened. "Oh, we'll do more than that. We'll make it look good." As Rick and Zara's smuggling vessel, the Star Dancer, prepared for its perilous mission, Alara Kieran worked tirelessly behind the scenes. She brokered meetings, made promises, and called in favors, gradually building a fragile alliance between Keller's hardliners and Noah's supporters. The Star Dancer's run through the Breen blockades was a harrowing gauntlet of close calls and desperate maneuvers. Rebel ships threw themselves into the fray, drawing fire and creating openings for the nimble smuggling vessel to slip through. The cost in lives was staggering, but the mission succeeded. Key Imperial shipyards fell to the insidious spread of Noah's viral code. Riding the wave of this success, the newly united rebel front struck hard at the Typhon system. Jace Keller led the assault, his tactical brilliance finally unleashed in service of the greater cause. The Breen command structure crumbled, leaving vast swathes of the Empire in disarray. Aboard the Defiant, Dante watched the reports flood in. System after system fell into rebellion or anarchy as the contagion spread, subverting entire fleets to rebel control. For the first time in years, he allowed himself to believe that victory might be possible. But the Empire wasn't finished yet. As Dante and his advisors planned their next move, an urgent transmission cut through their deliberations. The holographic display flickered to life, showing scenes of horror. Entire human colonies reduced to ash, civilians gunned down in the streets by black-armored figures that moved with terrifying precision. "The Blackguard," Jaina Cruz whispered, her face pale. "Daxus has unleashed them." Dante's eyes hardened as he watched the slaughter unfold. He turned to his assembled commanders, his eyes blazing with dedication. "This ends now," he said, his voice low and intense. "Plot a course for Indomitus. It's time we brought the fight to Daxus himself." As the rebel armada gathered for their final push, Dante stood on the Defiance Bridge, gazing out at the assembled fleet. The comm crackled to life, and Jaina's voice filled the air. "All squadrons report ready, sir," she said, a hint of anticipation in her tone. "Just give the word." Dante took a deep breath, feeling the weight of countless lives resting on his next command. He opened his mouth to give the order that would change the course of history. History. The rebel fleet surged forward, a tide of defiance against the looming monolith of the Adjudicator. Dante gripped the command rail, his knuckles tightening as the Defiant shuddered under enemy fire. "All ships concentrate fire on their main gun emplacements," he ordered, his voice steady despite the chaos. "Jaina, take your squadrons and hit their engines. We need that behemoth crippled." As rebel ships swarmed the massive dreadnought, Noah Bell stood at the ready, his heart pounding. The moment he'd been waiting for was finally at hand. The Adjudicator's defenses crumbled under the relentless assault. Explosions blossomed along its hull, and its engines sputtered and died. Dante saw their opening. "Boarding teams, deploy now," he commanded. "Noah, you're with me." They launched from the Defiant in sleek assault shuttles, dodging debris and sporadic weapons fire. Noah's grip tightened on his rifle as they approached the dreadnought's ruptured hull. The shuttle bay erupted into a firefight as soon as they touched down. Noah ducked behind a fallen support beam, trading shots with black-armored Breen troops. Dante moved with practiced efficiency, coordinating the rebel assault. "Push forward," Dante shouted over the din. "We need to reach the command deck." They fought their way through twisting corridors, the ship's alarms blaring a constant reminder of the destruction outside. Noah's world narrowed to the next target, the next corner, the next breath. Finally, they reached the command deck. The doors hissed open, revealing Emperor Daxus himself, surrounded by the last of his elite guard. "So, the prodigal son returns," Daxus sneered, his eyes fixed on Noah. "Come to avenge Daddy Dearest?" Noah's finger tightened on the trigger, but Dante's hand on his shoulder steadied him. "It's over, Daxus," Dante declared. "Surrender now." A savage firefight erupted, filling the air with plasma bolts and the acrid smell of ozone. When it was over, Daxus stood alone, his guards fallen around him. Noah approached the disarmed Emperor, trembling with terrifying rage. "You murdered my father," he growled. "You've slaughtered millions." Daxus laughed, a hollow sound. "And what will killing me accomplish? The Breen Empire is eternal. We are the future of this galaxy, boy. Your pathetic resistance is nothing but a—" His words were cut short as the ship rocked violently. Outside the viewports, Noah watched in awe as Jaina's fighters unleashed their payload of biokill codes. The vast shipyards surrounding Indomitus began to tear themselves apart, rogue ships firing on their own installations. Dax's face contorted in fury and disbelief. "What have you done?" he snarled. Before anyone could react, the Emperor lunged for a hidden console. Alarms blared, and a computerized voice announced the activation of an antimatter warhead. "If I fall," Daxus roared, "I'm taking you all with me." Time seemed to slow. Noah saw the horror on Dante's face, the frantic movements of the rebel troops. He thought of his father, of Eliza, of all those who had sacrificed everything to reach this moment. He made his choice. Noah sprinted towards the warhead, his body already beginning to glow with an otherworldly energy. He wrapped his arms around the device, feeling the heat building within. "Noah, no!" Dante shouted, but it was too late. Noah closed his eyes, channeling every ounce of his unique genetic code into the warhead. He felt the antimatter cascade begin, felt it tear through his cells. "Go!" he managed to gasp. "Get out of here!" The last thing Noah saw was Dante's anguished face as the rebel leader was dragged away by his men. Then the world exploded into light and heat, and Noah Bell was no more. Dante stumbled onto the Defiance bridge, his ears ringing and his heart heavy. "All ships, fall back," he ordered. "Get clear of the Adjudicator." They barely made it. The dreadnought erupted in a spectacular explosion, taking Emperor Daxus and the last vestiges of his reign with it. As the Defiant limped away from Indomitus, Dante watched the Breen Empire tear itself apart. Shipyards turned on each other, defense platforms went dark, and centuries of tyrannical rule crumbled in a matter of hours. But the victory felt hollow. Noah's sacrifice burdened immensely on Dante's mind as he turned to address his battered crew. The real work, he knew, was just beginning. Dante stared out the viewport of his modest quarters aboard the Alliance flagship Concordia. The stars stretched endlessly before him, a silent testament to the vastness of the liberated territories. It had been 5 years since the fall of the Breen Empire, yet peace remained elusive. A chime at his door roused him from his thoughts. "Enter," he called, turning to face his visitor. Ilara Chiron strode in, her face lined with weariness. "Another outbreak on Novus Prime," she reported without preamble. "The local militia is struggling to contain it." Dante's heart made. "Casualties?" "At least 1,000, mostly civilians caught in the crossfire between separatists and loyalists." He nodded grimly, processing the information. The Interstellar Alliance's promise of stability felt more tenuous with each passing day. Outbreaks of violence plagued numerous worlds still reeling from generations of Breen oppression. "We need to send aid," Dante decided. "Medical supplies, peacekeepers." A priority alert cut through their conversation. Dante activated the holographic display, revealing a frantic Alliance intelligence officer. "Sir, we've lost contact with the diplomatic envoy to the Tharsis sector," the officer reported, his voice tight with tension. Last transmission indicated they were under attack by unknown forces. Ilara's eyes widened. "That was my team," she whispered. Dante's mind raced. "Scramble a response fleet," he ordered. "I want every available ship in that sector now." As the officer acknowledged the command, Dante turned to Ilara. Her face was a mask of controlled anguish. "We'll find them," he assured her, though the words felt hollow even to his own ears. Days passed with no sign of the missing diplomats. Tensions within the Alliance Council reached a boiling point as accusations of negligence and calls for military action flew. Dante found himself increasingly at odds with Admiral Nelson Koch, a rising voice among the hardliners. "We can't afford half measures anymore," Koch argued during a heated strategy session. "Every moment we hesitate, more systems slip through our fingers." Dante thumped his hand on the table. "And how many innocent lives are you willing to sacrifice in the name of security, Admiral?" Before Koch could retort, an urgent transmission cut through the chamber. The holographic display flickered to life, revealing scenes of unimaginable horror. An entire star system, the Garin system, was being consumed by a cascading wave of matter decomposition. "By the stars," someone whispered as they watched billions of lives snuffed out in an instant. In the stunned silence that followed, a chilling message echoed through the chamber. "Behold the judgment of the true empire. The weak shall be purged, and from the ashes a new order will rise." The voice was unfamiliar, but the cold ruthlessness behind it sent shivers down Dante's spine. As the transmission cut out, he locked eyes with Admiral Koch. The unspoken question hung heavy in the air. What have we unleashed? In the following weeks, the galaxy descended into chaos. Admiral Koch, backed by a coalition of frightened worlds, assumed emergency powers. The Alliance military machine roared to life, unleashing devastating strikes against suspected Breen remnants with little regard for collateral damage. Dante watched in growing horror as the very atrocities they had fought to end were now committed in the name of security. He found himself increasingly isolated, his pleas for restraint falling on deaf ears. It was during a clandestine meeting with Jace Keller that the pieces began to fall into place. "We've been played," Keller growled, tossing a datapad onto the table between them. "While we've been chasing ghosts, this true empire has been metastasizing right under our noses." Dante scanned the intelligence reports, his blood running cold. A name jumped out at him. General Gorn, the exiled former Black Guard commander. Somehow he had survived, kept alive by arcane cybernetic augmentations. "The Omega particle warhead," Dante murmured, the horrific implications sinking in. "Gorn's behind it all." Keller nodded grimly. "And he's got more. Our best estimates suggest at least a dozen warheads, maybe more." Dante's mind raced. They needed to act to expose the truth before it was too late. But as alarms blared throughout the station, he realized with sinking dread that they were already out of time. Another Omega strike had been detected, this time in the Proxima system. As Dante and Keller rushed to the command center, they knew the galaxy would never be the same. The true war for humanity's soul was only just beginning.
You have reached the end of the story. If you enjoyed this story and want to support us, please leave a like and subscribe to our channel, and for every comment that says 88, I will heart every single one of them. Thank you for your time.